Cows. Where do I start with fucking Cows by Matthew Stokoe? It was first published in 1998, and it's probably the most fucked up book I've ever read in my life. It's and it's brilliant. I mean, I found it to be hilarious, disturbing, unsettling, disgusting, vile, just basically everything one could hope for in a fucking novel. The story is about a guy called Stephen. He's about a 25-year-old dude who's living with his mother, who he lovingly refers to as the hag beast for the for the majority of the piece. And he has a crippled dog that is called Dog, and he basically lives a very depressing existence. There's not really much hope for him, and he's just started a job at a slaughterhouse, which again is lovely, mainly in the bovine department. So he spends basically the majority of his day slapping together meat and running it through the machines. And you know, if you've got any idea what a slaughterhouse is and what goes on there, then you've got a pretty good idea that it's pretty fucking grim. So you're, well, for as an example for what to expect when you pick up this novel, here we go.
Gargantua, the hag beast. The unloving mother bitch cunt stood hulked over a 2-burner stove, stirring a pan of rancid pork. The kitchen stank of gas and oil and the caked dead fish decay that came out between her legs. Stephen sat at the small unbalanced table and watched Dog drag itself across the stickly lino to the shit tray. Its useless hind feet swished sideways with each lurching foreleg step, like the tail of some broken fish. He'd had it from a pup, 9 years, and had been there, standing impotent and frozen, when the hag beast crippled it with a brick. For no reason at all. That day in his teens was confirmation of what he had suspected since birth, that he was incapable of manipulating life as other people did. Unlike them, he could have no effect on the web of events that surrounded him. He could bring about no change. Dog had looked up at him, not savage or pain-snarly, but confused. Like, how could Stephen allow this to happen? In those days, Dog was young and had not learned how powerless Stephen was before the beast. Out in the hall now, the animal shitted a dark turd into a bed of ripped newspaper. Good boy. Snapped in half and still killing itself to please.
And if that wasn't enough for you, here's another one.
Did you dream about me last night, Stephen? She pressed her mouth to his ear and her breath stank. He could hear the spit collecting in the back of her throat. I found cum on your bed this morning. Dog was going to lick it up, but he didn't when I came in. It was thin. You need more of Mama's cooking. That stuff spread on my hand like milk. Mama wants you to be strong, doesn't she? She wants your cum all thick and gooey. Eat up, there's a good lad. Oh, that's a good boy. Swallow it down, that's right. Stephen jerked his head free and wiped his face. You fucking mad bitch. I didn't come and I didn't dream about you. If you say so, but I think Mama knows what she's talking about. The hag beast sat opposite him and started on her own food. See, I don't know why you make such a fuss. I eat just the same as you. Whatever my boy eats, I eat. That way we'll both be strong, won't we? She forced a mouthful of food through the gaps in her teeth, out past her lips in a glistening wad, then sucked it back in and swallowed it. You don't want me strong. You're killing me with this shit. Oh, Stephen, please. Look at my skin. It's grey. All boys have trouble with their skin. I'm 25. The beast ground her teeth. I know how old you are. Believe me, I've counted the years. I've counted them and I've seen them fill up with your disgusting habits. Do you know how bad you stink when you take a shit? Stephen's rage choked him. He wanted to kill her. He wanted his body to explode and destroy the suffocating little kitchen. But it wouldn't. It sat there paralysed by a carefully inbred fear of action against this fat hulk and did nothing. Only his mouth seemed to be working. How can you smell anything over that mess between your legs? The hag beast knocked over the table and stood up, jowls quivering, fists punching into the fat of her hips. You fuck! You shitting fuck! How dare you talk about my blood? My blood is the marker for the wound of your birth. It never healed, Stephen, and I let it run so I never forget the horror of that day. You pissed on me, you jackal! I should have killed you then! And on until Stephen broke from the table and ran out of the flat.
Overall, I would say that this novel is a bit like reading Animal Farm if it was in an orgy with Fight Club that was half pieced together as a kind of South Park, series, merged with a bit of, Marquis de Sade, maybe a bit of Chuck Palahniuk. But, I mean, to be honest, it really does take its own kind of level. It really pushes. I mean, you're talking everything here. You've got bestiality, rape, stuff that's beyond bestiality, a kind of vivisection kind of stuff, which is about, like, basically, because there's a love interest in the piece as well, of course, via the name of Lucy, who's of a similar age to Stephen, and she's just fucking nuts, basically. She believes she's got this kind of bile within her that she tries to cut out, basically, or tries to find within other animals. So she's got an interest with Stephen because of his new job at the slaughterhouse, and even he takes a kind of interest in it because Lucy believes that she's got this kind of the bile that's within human beings is actually within the organs, so you can actually find it and pull the evil out, kind of thing. So Stephen's basically got this kind of fantasy because he watches TV all the time of living this kind of bullshit existence that they live, mainly through kind of sitcom-esque kind of scenarios where they live, happy families. So he builds a kind of obsession with eventually doing this, and because of his job at the slaughterhouse, he eventually kind of gets the courage to tackle his life. Probably because of a character called Cripps, mainly, who's just insane. And here you get the kind of Fight Club-esque influence, I suppose, because Cripps believes that through killing, that a man can truly live free and be who he wants to be, and that it kind of transcends his existence in a sense. So he kind of encourages Stephen to indulge with his kind of ideology, but then that just leads to further and further deprivation and disgusting, horrible acts that Stephen's kind of indifferent to, I suppose, most of the time, although he does get a bit repulsed by some of the things that happen. But most of the time he just kind of allows it to go along because he kind of sees a kind of truth behind Cripps's ideas and his fantasies, basically. So he kind of goes along with the whole idea and accepts all the things that he does to him until the point that Stephen, that is, actually takes action, really, and his first kind of target is his bitch cunt of a mother that he calls the hag beast, and he tries to basically build up the courage to confront her and, well, put an end to it for good, I suppose. So overall, I mean, I do think the novel's got more to say than what's on the surface level, because I found it hilarious, I really, really did, and I don't know what that says about me, but it's extremely dark humour, that's what I will say. It's very dark humour, and if you read it with a kind of sense of realism, which I still think it manages to uphold because of Stokoe's writing ability. I don't know whether I'm saying that right, it's Stokoe or Stokoe or something. Stokoe sounds right, so I'll stick with that. And yeah, he's a very competent writer, and I found that the short, very snappy chapters really move the story along, and they managed to make the really repulsive elements of it, which there are plenty of, by the way, if I haven't mentioned that already, kind of go along smoothly and not really affect you too much. But there are moments that will make you squirm and wince and kind of shudder because they're fucking disgusting. I mean, they're really like on the point that I think most readers would throw it to the side just because it's so vile and so kind of unnerving in the way it's... I think it's mainly unnerving because of how, in some senses, realistic it can be. There are moments where it does push it maybe a bit too far, mainly through scat, I would say, where it gets a bit like, fucking hell, is this really happening at this point? Is this the mother-son relationship going, at breaking point here? Because it does get really, really grim and, disconcerting, I would say. But I think the kind of point that Stokoe was making quite well, and the most interesting points are when he actually starts talking to one of the cows, the Guernsey, who lives underground, and they basically started this kind of revolt. They're not really real cows in that sense because they've literally been bred just to go to the slaughterhouse and that's it. They don't know what it's like to be out in fields or anything like that. So they're kind of like underground, of a different breed of cow, which eventually Stephen kind of starts to work with them as well, because the Guernsey wants Cripps dealt with, basically, because he thinks he's a lunatic psychopath. But then you've got a lot of kind of comical elements within this kind of phantasmagorical sense that kind of starts happening. And that's where it kind of reminded me a bit of Fight Club in a way, because it has this kind of element of revolt and of revolution. And really, though, the cows kind of represent us and our kind of endless search for meaning and for structure and for kind of living a kind of existence that doesn't feel completely futile and pointless. And I think Stokoe actually makes some really good points about violence in a lot of ways, where through his writing he does actually display violence as a kind of answer to our conundrum, I suppose. And it's very difficult to argue with it a lot of the time. And of course, I'm not condoning any of it, but at the same time, I do see what he's getting at quite a bit, and how when, for instance, you would engage in something like war or a violent act, there's something about it that just puts you in the moment. And I suppose the only kind of mild comparison you could get is through kind of sport, where if you're really into a sport and playing it and you've got that competitive edge, I think it's a little bit similar to when you're in that kind of instinctive kind of hunt kind of mode, where that's all that matters. And for Stephen, whenever he kind of performs one of these acts, afterwards he feels clear-headed and he feels like he can control his life and the situation surrounding him, and that he is basically his own god. And in some moments it was really hard to say that's wrong, because it's like, if you were this guy, how could you have any hope of getting out of it, and how could you have any glimpse of hope of being any different to how he ends up? I mean, to say he's an anti-hero, I think, yeah, in a way, but in the same regard, taking his situation and the bitch mother he's been raised by during his whole life and his basically hopeless kind of future, I don't think you could say you'd be any different. So in that regard, I sympathise with him in that, just on that pure level. I didn't agree with his actions or anything like that, but I also didn't see much room for any other choice. So it kind of posed a few philosophical questions throughout it, despite its very, on the level, fucked up kind of content. Because if you do just read it for what it is, on face value, then you'll probably just be repulsed and you won't get it overall. And I actually just found, like, it definitely is a dark, humid, bizarro, kind of sickening, transgressive piece, which I fucking love. Whatever that says about me, I don't care anymore. But yeah, you got to read it in a kind of way where just put all your kind of moral standards to the side and just let it do what it does, because it does actually really make you think quite a lot, especially after the kind of middle point where the plot really starts moving along and it starts to build up a really good pace. And I was fascinated by it. I read it in like 2 days, maybe 3 days, something like that, and I really pissed through it. I couldn't stop reading it. And I think that's a credit to the writing in general. It's got a kind of thriller-esque, or parts of it felt like I was reading a kind of really intense, dark, twisted noir, fucked up thriller. And yeah, it was brilliant, I found. I loved it. I'm definitely going to check out some more of his work in the future. And I somewhat reservedly recommend you to read it whenever you can, because it's like one of those fucking novels that just gets inside you and you're like, I mean, this wouldn't get printed nowadays. I flat out refuse to think that it would get printed because it's just too fucked up. Coming out in 1998, it was a good era for kind of transgressive pieces, what with Hubert Selby Jr., Chuck Palahniuk, Bret Easton Ellis, they all kind of rose up around that time. And then, yeah, as I've spoken to a couple of you on here before, 9/11 happened, and then the fucking hero complex started kicking in, and all people wanted to do was watch superhero films, and transgressive art in general just took a plummet because of that. So for me, this wouldn't get printed nowadays, and it's a shame, because I do think it's got more to say than most stuff that comes out nowadays, and maybe if it has to be told through its disgusting elements, so be it. For me, that just added a kind of South Park-esque humour to it that I fucking love, and it's just like, you know, forget morality, you know, you're escaping into this dark, dingy, hopeless world, and for Stephen, whenever there's a glimmer of hope, all that really foreshadows is his upcoming complete downfall again. So it's just got this grim, there's no room for hope within this. And even Stokoe comments something about love being a kind of byproduct, and it's kind of unnecessary to Stephen's survival, and it just doesn't play a part in his life, and it never will. So it's just got this, it's very grim, but it's also thrilling, I found, and very provocative, vile. Again, I've got to point out that this is fucking vile, because beyond the bestiality and rape and things going up arses and cow guts being used for masturbation and things like that, it goes a bit above that as well. Like, there's things I don't want to mention because they'll spoil it, but it is fucked up, let's just say that much. And like I've already said, I think the philosophical elements of this book are actually really strong and rather kind of fascinating, especially about what it's saying in regards to violence and how it actually makes us feel when we do, well, not even commit to it and, you know, carry out an act, but also just get that feeling of anger where you really feel like it. You probably have smashed something before in the past where you just fucking lose it and you've got your blood's boiling and you just see red and you just smash something, maybe on your own or maybe in front of someone or whatever. But in that moment, it's just, you feel there's a fuel inside of you that really does make you feel alive. So it does make you wonder, you know, how far you push it, how much, because I think that is partly why many a man would go to war, especially in the past, because it's that feeling of fucking being in the moment, I suppose, and feeling like there is just one goal in mind, and that is to survive and to attack the enemy. And for Stephen throughout the novel, I think his is like, everyone's the fucking enemy. Even like his girlfriend, in a way, he has to try and manipulate and try and basically put his mark on her to be like, okay, we're not in love and we both know that, but if we carry on like this, then we can eventually find that love, and then all you need to do is just, you know, look after the house and do your kind of womanly duties, and then everything will be fine. But he also ignores the fact that she is just mental, like all the other characters within it, and there's basically very little room for this kind of naive notion of the future and of things improving. But that tragic element just adds to the pure kind of Schadenfreudian delight of being the reader and kind of going through it. So there is this really kind of sickening dark humour where you're just reading about what fucked up thing is going to happen next. And I was half rooting for Stephen to do at least something okay, but then I suppose as it goes on, you are a bit like, Jesus fucking Christ, it's like, is he just as much of a lunatic as everyone else? You know, he starts to really make you question it. But then as you're kind of normalised to the conditions of the world and what goes on within it, you kind of don't even really think of it in a kind of moral or amoral sense, in a very strange way. You get very kind of roped in or reeled in to the whole thing, and you're just kind of like accepting it. It's just like, oh, that's nice. Someone's just put a cock in a dead cow's skull. That's nice. Oh, what's going to happen next? It's like this. Oh, right. Okay. And it's, yeah, you kind of just go along with it after a while. And I think that's the best way to look at it. Don't take it too seriously, because you'll just probably throw up. But if you do see the humour in it, which I saw, I mean, anything where it's just going, shut up, cunt, eat your fucking dinner and stuff like that. I can't help but find it hilarious in a way, because it's that kind of taking of a normal lifestyle and just completely, subverting it and basically showing it for this kind of ridiculous thing that it is in a lot of ways. And yeah, through that kind of transgression, so much humor is just pouring out of it, and I fucking love that stuff. So yeah, that's it from me. Check out Cows if you dare, and let me know what you think in the comments below. I thought my stuff was fucked up before I read this, and yeah, now I'm kind of thinking, oh, actually, maybe I'm not that weird after all. I mean, there's still moments of mine that you could compare, I suppose, but at the same time, he's at a different fucking dimension to pretty much any other writer I've read, I think. There are a few that, you get kind of similar elements, but in this, it's every chapter, if not every paragraph, where it's just a different fucking dirty, vile description or action or plot point or whatever. And you're just kind of like, whoa, man, that is, but it's hilarious at the same time. I mean, I really did laugh a lot of the time reading it, but in between wincing with horror, which I kind of love that. I love to laugh and be disgusted at the same time, because I think that reveals certain truths about myself or about other people that I think are kind of, because, many a true word is spoken through jest, but surely many a confession is spoken through laughter as well. And I do believe that what people really laugh at, or how they laugh at it, reveals something about them that they probably never ever tell you in words, I suppose. And yeah, maybe I'm just kind of putting myself in a fucking corner here, but yeah, it's beautiful and vilely beautiful, I would say, if that's a word, vilely, or tragically, disgustingly beautiful. I'll say that. And that'll be it from me. Thank you very much for watching once again. If you want to check out my books, here they are. Yeah, I have to do that. And yeah, the Patreon, if you want to check that out, that'd be awesome. That's all I've got. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you next week. Bye.